Welcome to Key County Connects, where we connect you with some of the important issues in the county and in our region. I'm Enrique Cerna. Our entire country is grieving the deaths of 5 police officers in Dallas, Texas, and the fatal shootings of 2 men in Minnesota and Baton Rouge, Louisiana. How will these tragedies impact police work here in King County? And how can we build a stronger bridge between communities of color and law enforcement? We're talking today with King County Sheriff John Urquhart. Thanks for being here, Sheriff.
Thank you
very much. Where were you when you heard about the shooting in Dallas?
I was actually having dinner with my wife, and we're watching the news, and it started to come across that there was 1 police officer shot, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 1 had died, and 2 had died, and so by the end of the night, when I went to bed, there were 11 that had been shot, and 5 were dead.
When you heard and saw what had happened, how did it impact you, particularly as a law enforcement officer?
Well, I think the cliche is that we're a big family, and certainly locally within our organization, within the Northwest, and then across the country. So, while yes, it's a cliche, it's absolutely true, and it hurts all of us when a member of the family dies, and especially in this way, and especially so many. So it was a tough evening, it was a tough few days, and it's still tough to come to grips with that.
In your department, with having this incident happen, and obviously what's been happening across the country regarding police shootings and controversial shootings, how has it affected morale within your department?
Well, we still have to separate the 2 things out. We have to separate the officers that were shot and what happened, the controversial shootings, which obviously in this particular case are Minnesota and Louisiana. You know, we lose somewhere between 125 and 150 officers a year that die in the line of duty. Most of those are in car accidents, but they get shot and stabbed in other ways as well. So we kind of expect that going on. We don't expect to have 5. We don't expect that how it happened, but we are sort of used to that in a way. But you separate that out from the controversial shootings, and we have been so under the gun for so long, and it's tough. You know, we don't want to be there. We don't want to be the focus, the negative focus of the community, because we don't think that accurately reflects us being the sheriff's office or even the profession. These bad things happen just like they happen to any profession.
Did you reach out to your officers?
I did, that same night. And the email that I sent to them was twofold. Most specifically, I said that we have to keep doing our job, despite the fact that 5 officers were dead in Dallas. We have to keep going to work, keep doing our job, and keep doing our job professionally. I said, I know you will continue to do that. You have my support, and go ahead, do it.
What's been the reaction you've had with officers that you've talked to?
I don't think the question I get is, are your officers scared? And no, they're not scared. They're not scared to come to work. The shootings in Dallas didn't really scare them. I think they have family members that are more uneasy about the whole thing. But officers, I don't know any officer that wakes up in the morning and puts his uniform on and is afraid he's going to get shot or killed. We just don't think that way. There are many times that we look back at an incident that happened during our shift, and we may be afraid or something like that. But we're not afraid to go to work. We're not afraid to stay at work. We're not afraid to do our job. We all know we have a job to do, and we're going to be there doing it, regardless of any outside scenario.
You have to keep moving. I mean, the job doesn't stop.
The job doesn't stop. We still have to protect the community, and we have to continue to be professional in our job, and I think we are.
In the memorial services where President Obama spoke, he said that he feels that sometimes we ask too much of the police.
Oh, I think there's no question about that. A lot of it's because of budget cuts and because of what's going on. I like to say that we've replaced the men in the white coats that would come and deal with people that were in mental crisis. We replaced those with police officers. Now we have to do that. You know, we have to be police officers, we have to be social workers, we have to be mental health workers, we have to deal with society. And it wasn't always like that, and it is now. And a lot of it is just money. We are expected to do all of this, and we're expected not to make mistakes and do it the right way and do it in the way the community wants us to do that. I mean, that's all well and good, that's fine, but again, we're human, we're not perfect, we are going to make mistakes. Big mistakes and small mistakes.
What do you want the public to understand about the challenges that you face, that your officers face on a daily basis, and the relationship? Because right now, particularly with communities of color, there's a huge gap in trust.
There is, and that's really what it boils down to. You know, I heard the mayor say something the other day. He says, we have to get the community and the police come to a common understanding. And I said perfectly, I don't agree with that. I think the community and the police have that understanding. They're an expectation. They expect us to keep them safe. And we expect and work to keep them safe. The problem that we have is the lack of trust in the community. And let's face it, it's there. I don't need a poll to tell me that the community, certain parts of the community, primarily the communities of color, do not trust the police. At least some of them don't. Right. And that's not their problem. That's not their challenge. That's my challenge. That's my challenge to build that trust with those communities. And we are trying to do that. Frankly, I think we're doing a good job of working in that direction, but we're not there yet. And we have these setbacks. Clearly, Minnesota and Louisiana are setbacks. And when I heard about Louisiana first, I just go, oh, Jesus, here we go again. All the work we do, and then 24 hours later, Minnesota. I slapped my forehead thinking, my God, why does this have to happen? It's so frustrating because not only the leaders in my organization, every police organization, I think, and certainly the rank and file are trying to bridge that gap. We're doing the best we can. But it's going to take forever, and we are working off 100 years of history that we have to overcome.
I feel like it paints a broad brush, that even though it doesn't happen, it isn't happening here, at least not right now. Mm-hmm.
Well, it could happen here. It just hasn't. Yeah. And it does paint a broad brush. And I think that's what's the most frustrating to me. I understand it, but it doesn't mean I'm not frustrated. There are 900,000 police officers in this country. State, local, federal, tribal, 900,000. And we are focused on the actions right now in two different areas. Two officers for all practical purposes.
So what do you do? How do you try to bridge that gap? How do you try to build the trust?
Well, we start by talking about it, talking and listening. We always talk about dialogue. We talk about talking. We also need to talk about listening. We need to listen to the community, and hopefully the community will listen to us as well. We do that. Secondly, we do everything we can what I'm doing is trying to change the face of the sheriff's office, and I mean that quite literally. We are way too white and way too male, and we have been forever, and we need to change that. I've talked about that. You and I have talked about doing that. We need to do that. There is no magic bullet. There is not one thing I can do to build that trust. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen this year, next year, the year after. But there are small things that I can do, and I'm going to continue to do that. And things that my officers can do. Training that we can do. Training to identify implicit bias. Implicit bias, I think, is huge in the community, not just in the sheriff's office, not just in the police ranks, but in the community in general.
Police, that's one area. One interesting blog I read recently that was written by Dr. Jeff Duchin from Seattle King County Public Health. He's the health officer, and addresses the issue of race, injustice, and violence. And he talks also very much about, I would encourage people if they have an opportunity, we have it on the site at KCTS 9 where I work, but that he talks about the structural institutional racism and the fact that that's where we're failing to address a lot of things.
And it's not just in the institution of police, but in every institution.
No, and
that's
what I mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
That's right. And so it's so much bigger than a police problem. The problem is we're on the front lines. We're the one with the guns. We're the ones with the headlines. So we are the tip of the spear. We are the flashpoint. We are an easy target for this. But we're really no different than society that needs to get fixed, that needs to change, that needs to work on not only implicit bias, but explicit bias, racism as well.
Yeah, it's not just a police issue.
No, absolutely not. But you're not talking to the heads of industry. You're talking to the police. And there's a reason for that, because we are on the front lines. We are the easy target for that. I will say, I'm not the first one to say this, but I will say this. Of all the institutions in this country, the institution of the police protect communities of color more than any other institution. We are there. We do more to protect those communities than any other institution in this country. And we don't want to forget about that. The thing that really struck me about Dallas, watching TV until midnight that night, was that gunfire and all those officers. First thing they did is they protected those Black Lives Matter marchers. They got them down on the ground. They got them behind cars. They got them behind buildings. And then they ran towards that gunfire. That is what we do. And nobody should forget that. That is what we do day in and day out.
And I think with communities of color, perhaps where that divide comes in is that their concern is that, yes, you protect us in those situations, but then there are the situations where you come into the community and we don't feel protected. We feel fear, and we feel distrust.
That's right.
We feel that if you're going to pull me over, I'm going to be nervous. I had this conversation with you before, what I told my own son about how to handle himself, as if he gets pulled over. Don't be a smart ass. and number one, follow what they say.
And the irony is...
But it's the talk,
Oh, the talk. The irony is that's no different than white people that get pulled over. I've gotten pulled over. I'm nervous. I put my hands on the steering wheel. I certainly don't talk back. Despite being the sheriff, I don't talk back. The difference is I don't expect to get shot. White people are not afraid of being shot during a traffic stop. And communities of color, African Americans, they are. Not only are they nervous.
And it's not just African Americans, I want to say.
Yeah, I know. Communities of color. Yeah. But I guess comparing it to white people, we're not afraid of getting shot. We may be nervous about it, and there are things we should be doing that are no different than communities of color that get pulled over by the police, because you don't know why he stopped you. I don't care what color you are. There may be something going on in his mind that you have no idea about. But the difference is we're not afraid of getting shot, and they are.
Training. I know that at the police academy, Rahr, who heads what is our police academy.
We've met.
Yeah, I know you guys know each other. Anyway, she one of the things that she's been working on she was also part of the President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, and again working on this idea of police being guardians, not so much warriors. Is that working? Is that training coming down to your folks? Are you getting officers that have that difference in the mentality?
Well, your question was, is it working? And it depends on who you ask. I know for a fact that she has gotten a tremendous amount of pushback on that, primarily from police chiefs and sheriffs in Eastern Washington that don't deal with the same sorts of problems that I do or Chief O'Toole does on the west side of the mountains. But I have to tell you, for so many years at Police Academy, and remember the Police Academy trains every single police officer in the state with the exception of State Patrol. So every cop on the street comes out of that academy. But for so many years, they trained that, as she calls it, a warrior mentality. Yeah. And the young officers that would come out of there had the mental attitude that everybody out there that they were going to come in contact was going to try and kill them. Well, guess what happens when you think that way? You treat everybody like they're trying to kill you, and they're not. They are not. And then you throw in implicit bias, the big black, dangerous black man, you throw that in there, and boy, you've got all kinds of problems. So she's been down there. She changed that training philosophy despite the pushback. And I think it's been tremendous. Lead, listen and explain with equity and dignity is what she's also teaching. Listen and explain with equity and dignity. And she pushes that, and we push it in our post classes that we teach, and I push it every time I talk to my officers, because we're going to be able to deal better with the community. It's going to keep us out of fights. It's going to keep us from being injured. It's going to keep us from injuring other people, up to and including shooting them, if we do that. So it's a tremendous change, but I give Sue a tremendous amount of credit for changing that mentality. And it may be a gender thing, it may be a gender thing that she was able to go down there and see it from a different light. I don't know, but I'll give her credit for that. So yes, it's making a huge change, I think, long term.
When you talked about the need to change the face and faces of your officers and the makeup of your officers, what's the challenge in trying to get that done?
Civil service. Civil service is part of it. And I think there probably is a hesitation of persons of color to come to work to be a police officer. That may be part of it. I'm not sure. But we are required to, in the state of Washington, in most states, you have to take a test. So I'm looking now, I really want to examine that test, and is that weeding out people that could be good police officers because they can't pass that test because they're coming from a different view of life and especially view of police. So we need to look at that. We've talked about the other things I've done regarding second language and so on and so forth. It was very interesting. I was on a NPR show the other day, and I was talking about everything I've done. I started getting tweets about, okay, why don't you give extra percentage points for being black, being a person of color? You're doing all this other things. Why don't you do that as well? And my answer was really very, very, very simple. Because it's against state law. And I would do that despite what people don't like affirmative action. But when we did have it until I-200, we had a better police department. And I would do that in a heartbeat if that wasn't for that damn law that's there in the state of Washington. We have to get better representation of the community. It's not the be all end all, but it will certainly help. We have to do that.
Would you like to see a repeal of that
Absolutely.
initiative?
I would do it in a heartbeat. It's controversial. It's controversial in the black community, but I would definitely support that.
For your officers, as you move forward here and just on a daily basis and the challenges that are out there, what's your message to them?
Keep doing your job. Keep doing your job, and the main message I have is don't let the naysayers get you down. The second email I put out to everybody in the department was the video of Shatanya Taylor, who was shot in the leg in Dallas. African-American woman. She had brought her 4 sons, ages 12 through 18, to march with her, to put her word out about police violence. And she did a press conference at the Baylor University Medical Center, talking about what the officers did to protect her after she'd been shot. And she could not have been more appreciative of what they did. And her youngest boy now wants to be a police officer because of that. I mean, that's really, really, really powerful. And we need to remember that. We get all worked up about all the criticism. And we should certainly listen to it, but we can't let it dictate how we treat the public or how we do our job. And I wanted to remind them that here's what we really do. We protect people, and we did that night in Dallas.
Do you want that same message to go to those who are critical of the police department, of officers or law enforcement that represent Black Lives Matter or other organizations that, have been out protesting? What would you say to them? Same thing?
Basically the same thing, but I don't want to denigrate their criticisms. It's really easy to get defensive. And I don't want to do that. I think their criticisms are valid many times. They certainly have their reality, their perception. Perception is a person's reality, and that is their perception, I think. So I don't want to denigrate that. But, you know, there are two sides to the issue as well.
Community policing. Are your officers doing that?
What is it?
Getting out of your car.
I say what is it, because if you ask 20 police officers, 20 people, what community policing is, you're going to get 25 different answers. I spoke at a University of Washington Law School, and one of the students didn't like community policing because it meant stop and frisk. That has nothing to do with community policing. You're right. One of the definitions of community policing is get out of your police car. I've said it 100 times. I say it to every single police officer of mine that I talk to. The worst invention ever for policing was the invention of the police car. Because my guys drive around in their air-conditioned offices. They've got their computer there. They've got the internet there. They've got their cell phone. They never have to get out of their car except for a 911 call. That's not right. No, you can't interact with human beings from inside a police car, especially as a police officer, because people won't walk up to you to talk to you. And frankly, we don't want them to. That puts us in a bad position. So that means we have to park, we have to get out in an apartment complex, in a business district, and walk around and talk to people. If you're on a horse, like in Seattle, or if you're on a bicycle, people will come up and talk to you. And that's how you make these human connections, is by talking to people. The second worst thing that happened is we've done away with foot beats. The cop on the beat, he knew everybody, the good guys, the bad guys, and they knew him. That's absolutely critical. So that definition of community policing, it's more than that, but that's one of them, is to park their police car and walk around. And I just beat that into my folks' head all the time. That's really, really, really important. The one simple thing they can do every single shift is do that.
As we talk here, I see a lot of emotion from you with just, I guess, everything that has been happening, and sort of where you stand as an officer.
I've been a police officer for 40 years. Even with that, it's a second career for me. I love this job. I love serving the community. It's a noble profession. Some of the finest people I've ever met are police officers. So yeah, I want to do a good job. I want my people to do a good job. And as long as I'm sheriff, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that they do a good job and that the community trusts us to be the kind of police department they want us to be.
And what do you want the public to know about trying to bridge the gap?
I want the public to know that we are there to help them. Every single police officer that I hire, every single one says, I want to be a police officer because I want to serve and help the community. And sometimes it doesn't show very much, or they lose a little bit of that at some point in their career, but that's how we all started. They're good men and women, and they're there to help.
How do these challenging times make you better, or do they?
Oh, I think challenges always make people better. You know, it makes us rethink what we do. That's why the video cameras, the cell phone cameras, are so important. First of all, they've leveled the playing field. That's critical. That's fantastic. They've leveled the playing field because now we see what's going on. We see those rogue cops, perhaps, that we would have always believed them. And now we see a second view of that. I think that's a good thing. Surveillance cameras, body cameras, cell phone cameras, they've leveled the playing field. And that's good. It's a huge change in police work going forward. That's a good thing.
How many body cameras King County Sheriff's?
We don't have any. We don't have any body cameras. I would love to go to a body cam program, but until state law changes so that we can economically have them without fighting the public disclosure aspect of it,
right,
which just kills us. But at some point in time, I'm sure that every cop in the country will have a body camera. Certainly that's where the federal government, where President Obama is headed. It's where the Seattle Police Department is headed. So I think that will help. There is no magic. I said earlier, there's no magic bullet. There's no one thing that we can do, including body cameras, but it's a step in the right direction.
King County Sheriff John Urquhart, thank you very much for your time and your service.
Thank you.
And for your officers too. They're appreciated. They really are. And I think all of us as a community we need to talk. We need to work together so we can all stay safe.
And listen.
Yeah. Yes, and listen. Thanks for joining us today. Please visit us online at kingcounty.gov, KCTV. I'm Enrique Cerna, and we will see you next time.